I just had a blast with the $20,000 you saved up recently after returning from a 7-day overseas trip. My mother-in-law, Isabella, called me with a triumphant tone. Saved money $20K. What is she talking about? I have no memory of $20K. As a freelancer, I indeed have some savings for emergencies, but that's just in my bank account. I don't keep such large sums on hand, and my banking card is right here. Normally, no one else could withdraw such a large amount anyway. You did give it to me, so I took it from the sideboard drawer. You guys are rich, it's fine, she said. What I don't understand, but it seems you had fun. Thank you. Count on me for the next time. After leaving these words, the call ended. $20K? What money could that be? This question was answered when Anthony returned home. Ah, so that's what it was. A month later, multiple calls from Isabella came in. I completely ignored them, but when I checked, there were over 80. It's baffling, but it's her own fault. As I was looking at my mobile phone screen, another call from Isabella came in. I intended to ignore it, but eventually answered due to her persistence. Hey, what do you think you're doing? What does she mean? She's reaping what she sowed. Isabella's shrill voice resounded through the room from the mobile phone speaker. My name is Scarlett. I'm a 32-year-old freelance jewelry designer. I want children, but I'm too busy with work. My husband, Anthony, is the same age as me. He originally had a corporate job, but now he supports my work as a manager. When we married, my designer work was still sparse, and we relied on Anthony's earnings. But as I approached 30, my work stabilized, and I needed management for my schedule. It looks tough. Can I help with anything? Anthony, in a decent position at his company and expected to advance, bravely quit to become my business partner. With Anthony's management, we now have deals with famous international brands. Even as a couple, we have our troubles. It's Anthony's mother, Isabella, who lives alone at his family home. Isabella believes we're living a luxurious life and often comes asking for money. You always seem to be living so lavishly. I'm jealous. As a jewelry designer, I'm often invited to new product launch parties or dinners with company executives. For me, it's part of my business activities, part of my job. But to Isabella, it seems like nothing more than leisure for us, and she demands the same lifestyle for herself. I want to throw a party for my friend soon. Can you give me some money for it? Of course, I can afford to give her money. Just because she asks, it might look glamorous, but it's costly, and there are many business obligations I can't refuse. We're not living in luxury. This is all part of our work. Dressed up beautifully, eating at expensive places. I envy you. She says this with a hint of sarcasm. Isabella just doesn't seem to understand. While I keep refusing Isabella's requests, Anthony, being her son, sometimes gives in and hands her money. If giving her a little money keeps her quiet, then it's a small price to pay, he says. For Anthony, it's easier to give her some money than to deal with her interrupting our work, but Isabella's demands only escalate. It's left both of us at our wits' end. I want a new dress for an upcoming gathering I've been invited to. Just the other day, Isabella came over and pestered Anthony. A dress? Wouldn't a 2-piece suit work? We've been asked to buy clothes before. There might be cheaper options, but what Isabella wants is certainly not cheap. It's a fancy party. Everyone will be dressed up. I can't be the only one in old clothes. Isabella makes a fuss. I think proper attire, old or new, shouldn't matter. Oh, speaking of dresses, I need a matching bag too, so I'm counting on you. With that, Isabella left. Anthony had set up a credit card in Isabella's name because of her frequent money demands, telling her to use it for her expenses. At first, she overspent and got warned by Anthony, but she showed no sign of changing. Anthony asked her to at least report before making big purchases, so she began to tell us what she would buy. But it continued like this. Once she said, I found this beautiful ring and just had to buy it. Sorry for the after-the-fact notice. And the bill was astronomical. If you're going to spend like this, can you return the card? We can't afford to pay it all. The card was in Isabella's name, but Anthony was the one paying the bills. Isabella seemed to think having the card meant she could buy endlessly. A credit card isn't a magic money dispenser. What you spend must be paid for. Since the money wasn't coming directly out of her wallet, Isabella kept using the card. So, Anthony decided to put a limit on her card spending. What the heck? I couldn't pay for my shopping the other day. Isabella stormed in, complaining. We're struggling with the payments because of your overspending. So we've lowered your monthly limit. It's still enough, right? Just because you say that, you two are still dressing up and going to fancy places. How is what I'm doing any different, Isabella? That's part of our job. If that's a job, then what I'm doing isn't any different. It's unfair that only you two get to have all the fun. The product launches and parties often take place in luxury hotel event halls or restaurants, but our attendance is for work purposes too. Isabella, it seems like we're just dressing up and having fun. Still, since putting a limit on her credit card, she seems to have quieted down a bit. Sometimes Isabella comes to our house and seems to complain about something to Anthony, but for a while, life went on without major issues. As the end of the year approached, there was a change in my work. A foreign brand manufacturer approached me with a proposal to expand business dealings by moving our base overseas. I was over the moon with excitement. If this worked out, I could join the ranks of top-tier designers. Anthony, handling it as my manager, said, "It's a chance we have to take." Right, opportunities like this are rare, but then I'm worried about Mom. She might even say she wants to come with us. Given Isabella's past behavior, it was a plausible concern. It would be wonderful to live overseas. I want to come too, we told Isabella about it that weekend. She said just as we predicted, we're going there for work. It's not going to be a leisurely life, Anthony tried to explain, but Isabella wouldn't give up. You're trying to trick me. You plan to live even more lavishly there without watching. We're not moving there permanently. We'll come back after our work settles down overseas. You're saying that, but you're planning to leave me behind, aren't you? Exhausted by this circular argument, both Anthony and I were tired. Okay, we can't take you with us, but how about we pay for a week-long trip for you instead? Anthony suggested, worn out from convincing her. Really? Are you sure? We'll cover your flight and hotel, but the rest is up to you. Yay, thank you. Isabella left, half happily, but the peace didn't last long. A few days later, while Anthony was busy with the overseas move arrangements, Isabella visited our house. Hey, Scarlett. Anthony said that, but I want to shop over there too. Can you give me some money? What about the card that Anthony gave you? I asked, knowing there was a card she was supposed to use. That's the thing. Anthony finally took it away from me the other day. It seemed she had been admonished for overspending and had it taken away. Maybe he was worried she'd misuse it with different currency rates overseas, but I didn't have such money on hand either. I can't give you money without Anthony's approval. Can you ask him? It's no use asking him. That's why I'm asking you. Isabella left, raising her voice. Over the New Year's, Isabella went on a 7-day trip abroad. I assumed Anthony had somehow managed the money. However, upon her return, Isabella revealed an unbelievable truth. The day Isabella returned, I received a call on my mobile. I'm back! It was so fun! On the other end, Isabella excitedly shared her sightseeing and dining experiences, even though I hadn't asked. And I overbought souvenirs, couldn't fit them in my suitcase, so I had them shipped from there. Can't wait for them to arrive. That's nice, I replied, feeling a bit fed up. Thanks to the money you saved up, I had a blast. Saved up money? What are you talking about? I had no recollection of such money. Sure, I had some savings for business emergencies, but that was in my bank account, and Isabella couldn't possibly withdraw cash from it. You really didn't notice? You're surprisingly oblivious. Despite what she said, I had no memory of it. I found it in your house's sideboard drawer. $20,000? What money? Why should such money be there? I couldn't imagine us keeping cash at home, especially not such a large amount in a drawer. Confused, I said to Isabella, I'm not sure what money you're talking about, but if you took it from our house without permission, that's theft, even if you're family. Do you understand? That's why I'm telling you now that I used it. Isabella said this nonchalantly. I have no idea about this money, but if you took it and used it without saying anything, it's a crime. And if it was something Anthony had set aside for an important deal, it's even more serious. I said this, recalling that there hadn't been any disruption in our business dealings or payments while Isabella was on her trip. You two live so extravagantly, so why can't I have a little of that? Think of it as doing a favor for your parent. It's not a big deal, right? Such self-entitled reasoning. It's one thing to take money from her son and his wife, but this is not how someone should act after taking someone else's money. I'm glad you enjoyed your trip. I'll ask Anthony about the money when he gets back, I replied, still unclear about the whole situation. Anthony will understand. After all, I'm his only mother, and $20,000 isn't much to him. All right, I'll pass the message along. I was astounded at Isabella's lack of awareness. Please tell him that, she said. Thanks. With that, she ended the call. Still $20,000 in cash at home. What was the money for, Scarlett? Do you know about the money I left in the drawer that night? Anthony returned home with a troubled look and asked me, 10 days ago, I withdrew it from my bank account. It's gone now. It was you keeping such a large sum in a drawer? Didn't you think it was careless? I needed cash immediately for an urgent payment. Do you know anything about it? It can't be that. Anthony looked at me suspiciously. No, today Isabella called saying, thanks for the $20,000, had a blast with it. I didn't understand what she meant. So it was Anthony's money after all. But what was such a large amount meant for? Hey, if it wasn't for a business payment, we've been doing bank transfers for a long time, right? Why cash all of a sudden? I understood it was Anthony's money, but still didn't get the whole picture. So Mom took it without saying, then it's her fault. What do you mean? I was still puzzled and asked Anthony back. Anthony started explaining why he had left such a large sum at home. After limiting the credit card's amount, Isabella had secretly been borrowing money from various sources. This included payment on consumer finance cards and credit cards she had secretly opened. When Anthony found out, he took all her cards and prepared the cash to repay Isabella's ballooning debt. Although, if I gave her cash, she'd spend it herself, so I planned to pay the institutions directly. A bank transfer would leave a record in our accounts. I didn't want too many records in our bank accounts for the sake of trust with our business partners and bookkeeping. That's why I decided to cash it out and pay individually. Supporting Isabella's overseas trip was like a parting gift, as we wouldn't be able to take care of her like before after moving abroad. So that's what it was. What will become of Isabella now? Debt collection notices and payment demands will probably start coming soon, but since she spent it herself, there's nothing we can do, Anthony said nonchalantly. A month passed, and as I was busy packing for the move, Isabella's calls to my mobile phone kept coming. Anthony had said not to bother with her, but the calls were too frequent to ignore. When I counted, there were as many as 80 almost every day. It was just enough to make me concerned. Just as I was thinking about it, my phone rang again. Isabella hesitating. I missed the call, but soon it rang again. I ended up answering. Why aren't you answering my calls? Isabella's voice sounded almost like a cry. I'm sorry. I've been busy with moving preparations. What's wrong? I tried to calm down and listen to what she had to say, and to hear Isabella's side of the story. It's not just, what's wrong? They're asking for money. Payments almost every day. It's too much. What about Anthony? You contacted him, right? He seems to be blocking my calls. I can't get through to him at all, Scarlett. You're my only hope now. Please help me. I was surprised that Anthony would take such a drastic step with his own mother. If he had paid off Isabella's debts with the money he had prepared, this situation wouldn't have happened. It seems Isabella is now inundated with collection letters from finance companies and consumer lenders. The collections calls are nonstop, and she seems helpless to do anything about it. I had never witnessed such a scene before. It was something I thought only happened in dramas. I'll mention it to Anthony, but I can't say what he'll do. A mother in trouble, it's a son's duty to help, right? Please ask him for me. Okay. With that, the call ended. We need funds for our business expansion overseas, and we can't afford to help Isabella. Besides, it's her own fault for using the money Anthony had prepared to pay off her debts. He called. I told Anthony about the call after he returned home tired. He dismissed it coldly. I had planned to sort things out before we left, but she wasted the opportunity herself. That's true. The money was originally intended to clear Isabella's debts. She used it for a lavish trip instead, leaving no room for excuses. Despite continued calls from Isabella, I set her number to block, just like Anthony, though I wished I could help her. Being Anthony's mother, there's nothing I can do if he's decided to ignore her. Meanwhile, the day of our move overseas was drawing closer. I had to finish packing. As I looked around the still-cluttered room, I thought, apparently Isabella ended up selling her house to pay off her debts. In addition to the $20,000 that Anthony had intended to repay, she seemed to have hidden more debts. The amount was so large that even after selling her land and house, she couldn't pay it all off. The total balance was unimaginable. "Hey, our family home, it's gone. Are you okay with that?" "How can I be okay? But there's nothing we can do." Anthony looked somewhat sad. Losing the house where one grew up must feel like a great loss. Having lost my parents' house early, I understood the loneliness of losing one's family. But unlike me, Anthony lost his place to return to because of his living mother. I can't even imagine how that feels. Isabella is now living in a cheap apartment, struggling to repay the remaining debts with her part-time job. At her age, it must be hard to find work. I feel a bit of sympathy for her. However, the consequences of her own spending led to this, so she's to blame. Even for the elderly, they must take responsibility for their actions. My business is going well overseas, and the move has brought more inquiries from other brands. I'm getting offers from unexpected places, something I couldn't have imagined back home. It's all very appreciated, but I'm so busy I barely have time to sleep. Despite being overseas, I don't have the time to explore. Anthony is also a busy man in everything. At this rate, having children is still a distant thought. I ponder this as I gaze at the foreign cityscape outside the window.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident, especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it." Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. "Do you two know each other?" "Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, 'I'm moving to the sales department soon.' If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. "It's still working hours." Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one?" As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.